the Nakano district in Tokyo, Japan. Let me just get everything set up here so I can. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so the Japanese education system adopts what they call a 6334 school instruction. This means that it's 6 years elementary education, 3 years middle school or junior high, 3 years high school, and then 4 years of university. The terms fall under summer, winter, and spring. And actually, the schools here start in March, I believe. Yeah, March, and they end in the next year of April. So it was kind of a shock to me when summer started, and I'm saying goodbye to the kids, like, thinking that I won't see them until next year in their new school term. And embarrassingly enough, they were saying, "What are you talking about?" So, lesson learned. Um, most of the kids here prefer the private schools due to the I'm sorry, I prefer, that's actually a typo. I meant to say public schools. They prefer public schools over private schools due to the low presence of bullying and gangs. And it's actually really interesting just because the I guess the level of discipline that they uphold in public school systems is really high, and so I'll get into that as well. So because of that, I guess one of the benefits of being in a private school is you kind of just are automatically admitted into a high school of your choice, whereas in public school you have to take these grueling exams in junior high, which pretty much is what they're in junior high for. Sadly enough, their last year is pretty much dedicated to learning these exams and passing them. One of those things that you just kind of like want to cry because it's like, well, what's the point, But anyway, I digress. So let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. So it's a different system. The elementary school and junior high are mandatory, of course, whereas high school is an option. You don't have to go into high school. Some students, especially in rural areas, go on to be fishermen or rice field workers or just industry workers in the area where they live in the community. And you tend to see more high school attendance in areas with more of a thriving economy. I mean, I'm not saying anything like Tokyo, but just more of a thriving economy, that they feel like there's something to do. Or they end up just moving to Tokyo for high school, which is kind of interesting as well. As you can see, teachers, this is kind of like a typical classroom in the top picture. And I don't know if you can notice it, but in the bottom right corner of the picture, you see like the desks, and then they're kind of facing a small little contraption. This contraption I'll get into in a minute, but just keep your mind on that for a minute. And on the bottom picture, I'm sorry, yes, there is training for vocational job. In fact, there is a schools dedicated to that. So if there is a student that wants to become a fisherman, there are actually vocational schools for fishing school and captain and boating and all that stuff. So it's not to say that they're just kind of like left into the wild, but just the typical high school setting is kind of like out of for them. They're basically just focused on fishing or on the industry that they choose. So it's kind of nice. And usually, unfortunately, it's usually the loud, obnoxious students that don't care to be in class or just walk around and create riffraff. So it's sad, like, that's kind of like what they want it to amount. But I mean, to each their own. I mean, that's what they want to be, and that's what they choose to be. In the bottom corner, there's the teacher's room. I guess a lot of people, I first thought it was a teacher's lounge, but it's seriously not to be considered a teacher's lounge. There's nothing loungy about this the situation. I mean, it's really at some points in the day, it's kind of like a boiler room. The teachers are coming in and out of the room, discussing different tactics on stressing targets in the classroom. I guess if you want to look at it here on the left yellow bar is where the principal and vice principal sit. So they're facing all the teachers. And if you kind of look closely, you'll see a little number above each grouping, and that just means it's the year of the class year. So this is a junior high school class teacher's room. So on the bottom, the blue is the first years. Above that is the second years. And on the right is the third years, and that lonely little orange box in the third years is me in the red arrow. So that's kind of fun. Um, so yeah, and so we'll also look at the other little differences as well. So if you want to go to the next slide, this is called Kyushuku. So in Japan, most of the kids in all the public schools do not eat in a big giant common room. They actually eat in their own classroom and usually share the same lunch. So what happens is the students will come in, and I guess the lunch ladies will come upstairs or and drop off their food unprepared. Well, I mean cooked, of course, but unprepared. And the kids will bring it into the classroom. And as you can see right behind and all the way in the very back where the backpacks are, you can kind of see what it looks like. Just, there's like a bucket of soup and a pan of like different little things and a big giant tray of rice. And always they elect students to serve the other students in the same exact amount of food for everybody. So it's usually it's just really interesting, just like how much of a team that they are, and they respect each other's yeah. And that's me. That's me in the middle. This particular class was one of my favorite. Like I rated the classes by like A, B, C, and this was definitely an A class. Not in the sense that they were awesome in English, but just super super happy, always eager to be with me. There were some struggling students, but even they were happy and just excited to engage me. But the thing that caught me off guard here is this is definitely not a usual setup. For some reason, this class enjoyed putting me right in the middle, like some kind of rock star. And so, yeah, as you can see, it was a little awkward when I first walked in. I'm like, where do I sit? Right in the middle. And so they basically just start just barraging you with questions, like, well, what's it like in the States? Like, do you like Mexico or do you like the U.S.? Because I'm Mexican. So, just different questions. Do you like baseball, and what's your favorite, hobby? And so I barely get a chance to eat anything, but it's definitely cute. And the kids are absolutely amazing. This is an elementary school. This is a fifth grade class. So yeah, next slide, please. Okay, so here we have what's called osoji. So usually either after lunch for elementary school or sixth period for junior high, the students take part in what's called osoji. And so what happens is they clean up the school. Each class breaks up into groups, and each group is responsible for a section of the school, whether it's the hallway, the toilets, the classrooms, the chalkboard, the chalk erasers, but they definitely have to take part in it. And it's funny, I'm thinking they're going to be dragging their feet doing it, but no, they enjoy it. It's for them. It's like it's a time to socialize because the classes are actually mixed. So you'll have a few first graders with some fourth graders all cleaning the stairways, and so they're getting to talk to each other. So there's a lot of camaraderie, which is super amazing. I mean, to this day, I'm still pretty shocked at that. And I myself have joined in on the SOG just to be a part of the team as well. I don't want to be like the outcasts, the foreigner that doesn't have to clean or anything. So I definitely roll up my sleeves, and definitely not the toilets, of course, but definitely helped out with cleaning. So it's really really fun and totally amazing. But yeah, so let's see. Next slide, please. All right, so yeah, it's a completely different system. The classes are very team oriented, unlike schools in the States where the students are respected for their individuality. The Japanese schools actually control the individual by observing group rules. What that means is they want to see how they adapt to the group and how they get along, and that to them is a very big deal. Although individuality is somewhat praised, it's not really their focus. They do definitely want like a group effort when it comes to certain things, especially outside the classroom, like when you're outside playing sports. It's that mentality. So speaking of sports, like after school activities that are attended by the students is over like 95%. That means that and usually in the junior high, elementary school, there's not much to do. after school just because they've had a tough day and they need to get all the work done. So it's kind of like a big transition from kindergarten. But with junior high school, yeah, they definitely attend some sort of after school activity, and that usually includes maybe like badminton, soccer, table tennis, brass band, which is kind of interesting, kendo, judo, the list goes on. But they're usually in some sort of after school activity. Amazingly enough, if they're not doing that, they're actually doing what's called a juku, which is like a cram school. They're going after school to go to more school, which is interesting, to perhaps get extra knowledge on math or social studies or something so that they can definitely pass that exam at the end of their third year for junior high. Yeah, so next slide. Excellent. So this is Nakano. Are you guys able to see the kanji on the top? I know that I was trying to write earlier a little bit, and I don't know if it came up or not, but hopefully you guys can see the characters. It's Nakano is the name, and basically this is kind of Tokyo from a little bit more of a focused view. But if you were to zoom out, Tokyo is on the uh, east side of Japan, in the east middle, and then right off of Tokyo Bay, of course. And I don't know, just to give you a few landmarks, if you want to kind of look at this map a little bit. On the bottom right, where you see Tokyo Bay, if you can notice a little city called Urayasu. It's kind of all by itself, a little, it's like jutting out into the bay. Actually, right below that, there's a dot, and that is Tokyo Disneyland. So it's really cool to be right next to that. Also, if you notice in the right, in the smack dab middle where it says Chiyoda, that's actually where the Imperial Palace is, which is a very beautiful palace, and that's kind of where the emperor lives. Um, and let me see here. Oh yeah, and if you guys can just take a quick look, right below where I put the little pin of where Nakano is, you see a word called Shinjuku. Keep that in mind. I'm going to get into Shinjuku in a minute, but just so you kind of have a mental image of where it is on the map, that would be good. Okay, next slide. So here's some statistics about Nakano. It's on the west end of Tokyo. The population is, let's see if I can say this right, 300,000, or roughly 300,014. Um, and the ethnicities in all of the Japan usually hold like a 1%, which is really, really low. So, I mean, you can probably understand that there's going to be definitely a lot of discrimination, not heavy where they're calling you names, but just, like if you sit down at a subway seat, like your chances of someone sitting next to you are very slim, especially in more rural areas. They just kind of leave you kind of by yourself, which is fine. I mean, it kind of does give me a sense of reality of what discrimination is like in the States, but it's expected, I guess. This area in Nakano is considered mostly residential compared to other areas in Tokyo. There's about 25 elementary schools and 12 junior high schools. The average class size is about 34 students, and there can be anywhere from two class sections to seven class sections. What that means is, like, for example, in one of my schools, I have a first grade class, and the class itself has, let's see, A, B, C, D, E, F, so about six sections. So each section has about 34 students. So it's a really, really big school. And so I'm having to actually teach every single section as well within the school year. So it's a real time crunch to get all the lessons in, as well as the other schools that I'm teaching. So in total, I teach three schools. That's why I said it was very comfy for that young lady in China teaching, because yeah, I teach three schools, and the other two schools are a little bit smaller, but I guess just depending on my schedule, I have to go to each school on different days. And on days that they can't, the English is not scheduled into the program, I'm actually, I guess, HR in the office of the company that dispatches me. So, yep. Next slide, please. Okay, so teacher recruitment. Let's see here. Teacher recruitment is basically, you can do it the same way here, and I'm sorry, over there in the States. But basically, you go through school, or you can do like a technical college as well and just get the licensing. It's 2 to 4 years for completion, depending on the program in the school. And 3 weeks of clinical research are required as well. So in a sense, it does actually mimic the way you would get a degree, or I'm sorry, a license here in, I'm sorry, there in the U.S. And let's see, once you've graduated from them, you can make the decision as to where you want to work. So for example, in Nakano, you have the option of going in, you would have to go into Tokyo, and you would have to go into Tokyo. Oh, actually, let me go ahead and address this question. You said that are there any schools close to the other one? Yes. They're each about, like, because you're on a main line. So for example, if you wanted to grab like one of the trains, the train will actually take you to each of the schools. So when planning where to teach, that's definitely a major point. Like we'll coordinate. Okay, well, these three schools are within 30 minutes of each other. So you maybe you would factor in 15 minutes walk from the school to the train station, and that's kind of where they want to leave you. They don't want you to walk more than about half an hour to the school. And there are some schools where teachers do have to walk about a half hour to the school. So it's quite a hike. Luckily, I lucked out on that one. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question. So yeah, once you've graduated, and so you take your exam for the specific city you'd like to teach. And so after that, you go into, like, for example, Nakano, you go to Tokyo and you take your test to get into the Tokyo Board of Education. Once you've passed that exam for Tokyo in October, then you have to wait March of the next year to be placed somewhere in Tokyo. So you really, and as you can see, Tokyo from the map is a really big place. You don't really know exactly where you're going to be placed. So you can be placed on the east end, lower end, west end, and it's up to the school, up to the Ministry of Education's choice as to where to go. Actually, Tokyo, to be honest. And no, there aren't any school buses. That's the really, really interesting thing here. All the kids walk to the school, and it could be as long as 30 minutes walk in the city, anywhere. And that's kind of a shocking thing to me. I mean, if you've ever seen any of those movies depicting Japan where there's like lots of lights and cars and bikes and stuff, something that I guess they don't really focus on is the little kids that are just walking with their cute little backpacks to school, and they're pushing their way through the crowds and on their way to school. And most of the people here in Japan respect those kids a lot, and they move out of their way because they know that they have to get to class. So it's pretty much a safe area. Like, everybody's always watching out. It's like almost like their own children. They can kind of feel like, okay, that if that was my kid, I would look out for him. So as they're walking around, you just kind of keep an eye on them and make sure that they're safe. So they're always being watched. It's a really good thing. It's a comforting feeling. But yeah, no school buses, not even for me. um, So, for example, one of the teachers that I interviewed here, her name is Kino Sumori. So once she was placed into the Tokyo City Board of Education, then she would have to go into an interview with the Board of Education for that specific district, which is Nakano, the one we're talking about. So go ahead and hit the next slide, please. So once you're accepted into the Board of Education, then it's up to, like I said, it's up to them to put you everywhere, anywhere that they want, any school. You don't really have a choice. And sadly, if they don't like you during the interview for whatever reason, maybe your personality they don't think that it'll fit, or you're just not jovial, or you're too small. I mean, it could be millions of reasons. They never really tell you. Then the process continues until you find the exact district that you're able to work at. So every 3 to 4 years, the teachers have the choice to be able to go to another school, and but obviously not their choice. It's the BOE's choice within that Nakano district. And then after 9 years, you're just automatically moved to another school. So the idea is that these teachers are rotated. I know I saw a movie, I forgot the name of the movie, but I remember there was a movie where they said they had like the lemon dance, and basically they just pass off these lemon teachers from one school to the other, and it's a sad story. And I'm just trying to remember. I think it was the Superman, Waiting for Superman movie. If anybody's seen it, um, and it's kind of the same way here. Like here, that way, these teachers didn't are just kind of moved from district to district, or actually from school to school. So it's really interesting. um, Actually, no. Though, actually, it's interesting that you mentioned the Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. I remember, 2 years ago, I had to teach, and actually this year as well, had to teach one of the chapters was about the bombing in Hiroshima. And I'm all for history, and I think I wrote this in my last report. I'm all for history. I think it's really important for kids to know exactly what happened and everything. But there's a time and place. I don't think it's appropriate for that to be in an English in an English class setting. Like the idea for this program is to incite interest and create a positive learning environment when teaching, and when you have to read these sad stories and then have the kids repeat to you these sad stories because they're trying to learn the target language. You're just like, wow, I feel really uncomfortable, and I actually had one student ask me, well, who dropped the bomb? Like, I guess I don't know if he knew or not, or he was trying to be funny, but and I just kind of like gave him the most serious look, and I said, I think I was like, we did, we dropped the bomb, and that was kind of how this whole thing started and ended, and it was just kind of like an awkward silence, and so I just had to come up with a different tactic and just kind of breeze through that lesson as fast as I could, so that it just really sets a really negative tone for the day. But again, I'm all for it, but it was just really awkward. But yeah, so there is mention of it, but we don't really talk about. I guess we talk more about the remembrance of Hiroshima. So our I guess Remembrance Day was, I think it was last month or something like that. I can't remember. It was November, but basically it's a memorial service at the actual city in Hiroshima, and the president will actually give a nice speech, and just kind of like, let's remember to always be together. It's a very togetherness speech, so it was really nice, very touching. Um, I'm sorry, I would have had to say why did we drop the bomb? Yeah, it's one of those just really uncomfortable conversations. But okay, so let's move on. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we got the salary. The average salary is about 300,000 yen. If we were to convert that to US, if anybody's got a quick access to Google, it kind of comes out to about 280. I'm sorry, 2,800 a month. I could be wrong on that, but if somebody wants to do the translation, that'd be awesome. On top of that, each year you stay on as a teacher, you get a bonus. And those club fees those clubs that I mentioned, the after school clubs, these students actually get, these teachers actually get about a $200 bonus each month for helping out and being part of those clubs. So if they are in the badminton club, they get either 100 or $200, and plus on top, like if they're on the weekends as well, they would also get like an extra, maybe another 100 or up to $300 worth of a bonus for each month for the club. So when I say club fees, that's money they're getting, not paying. Just to clarify. Um, they also get two bonuses during the year. One in, I believe, one in the summer and one in the winter. And they're pretty good. They're pretty decent. They're not bad. They amount to about 3,800. But again, yen. All this is in yen. And then after taxes and other deductions, you're pretty much left with about a 210, I guess, 200,000 salary, which is pretty weak. And this is just for a starting teacher. I mean, obviously this would increase over the years, but it's pretty sad. It's not much to live on, especially if you're starting a family and have some kids. So there's definitely got to be another source of income because this is pretty bad. For somebody who's single and and just kind of working out, this is a really great salary. But most of the teachers are usually married or going to be and have kids as well. Okay, next slide. So parental involvement. This is kind of interesting. In the elementary school, I noticed that there was a really big um, participation in the PTA. The parents actually play a really nice role and have, I would say, like a 40% voice in actually moving and shaking things up. And it's usually for the better. Not to say that there are some horror stories, but definitely there's some things for the better. And on the right, the picture that you're looking at there with all the crazy characters is just basically like the hierarchy of the PTA. So it starts at the top with the country. So there's a country board for the PTA, and then it goes into their blocks, then schools, then each individual classroom, and then each individual PTA member. It was just kind of interesting graphic to throw in there. But yeah, sadly, next slide. There's really no or little to no involvement in the junior high, and I know that I think there was a video in our discussion a while back that like how to get teachers getting involved and parents getting involved in the school as well, and I thought that was such a cool thing, and it's really sad that it doesn't really happen here. But it's not to say that the schools don't try to promote parental involvement, because they do. They have like what's called a Saturday class. Yeah, I know, a Saturday class. And so depending on the school, they'll either have 2 to 3 a month. And it basically just opens the doors to the parents so they can come in. And mind you that the kids have uniforms, so they're coming into school with uniform and everything. Nothing's changed. So it's another typical day, and the lessons are the same. So we're teaching our regular lesson, probably with a little more pizzazz since the parents are watching, but nothing else is going to change. And this allows the students, the parents, to come in and just kind of watch their kids. If they think that they're kind of like acting up in class, this is like a good opportunity to be like, see, this is what I'm talking about. Like, he doesn't stop, da 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 da. And and I actually had one instance where I was in an elementary school doing this, and all of a sudden the parent was noticing his kid kind of acting, just without even saying anything, just walked up and smacked him on the back of the head and just grilled him, and then the kid just stood up straight, and I was like, it was very awkward. Like, it was just out of nowhere. It just came out of nowhere. But I just smiled and continued my lesson. But it was really good. And I was like, hopefully he could be here every day. I'd pay him for that. But yeah, it's sad though. And it was like a love tap. It wasn't like he was gonna like berate him after. It was more like a come on, pay attention, like typical Latin parent, like like nudge. And on average, sadly, it's only a handful of parents that will, sporadically come in throughout the day, and it's like I said, it's really sad. And yeah, also another thing that we do have monster parents, just like in the States. Thankfully, in my own personal schools, I have never had a incident where we had to deal with monster parents. But and actually, that's the exact name that they give them here, is monster parents. Like they have the name for it, and oddly enough, it's in like a romanized speaking, so it's really funny. In my company, that I have heard of situations where it escalated pretty bad to where the actual Board of Education was calling not only the teacher but the school and saying, what's going on, because of the parents. If you guys want, I can give you the story, or I can kind of move on. It's up to you. I don't know. What do you guys think? Okay, story. So, as you know, the international having an international teacher, you're pretty much seen as a rock star, of course, and you always want to be, like the kids are always wanting to be engaging with you and participate in their clubs and in their games. And of course, in the elementary school, it's not to say the same. You usually have, for the most part, a great relationship with the teachers, the principal, and the students. And so one of our teachers, and I'm talking from the HR end of it, one of our teachers actually was invited to go swimming with the students. And actually it was the special education students. So yeah, and it's not a big deal. I mean, it's normal for because we do swimming practice during school as well. We have each school, elementary school and junior high, have a pool installed in their school. So during the summer, when it's hot, it's like the best. It's really the best to just take a period off and join the students and whatever they're doing when they're swimming or whatever. And so I guess this teacher was invited by another Japanese teacher to join in the swimming, and they did. And for some reason, I guess the vice principal wasn't notified, and the student went home and told her parents. Well, this, well, without a doubt, became a nightmare because the parents freaked out. Why is this foreigner even in the pool to begin with? And with my children, like, I don't know who it is. I've never met him. She goes to the vice principal. Actually, she goes to the Ministry of Education directly and calls them. Like, why is this foreign teacher swimming with my kid? Like, I don't feel comfortable. Why would you allow this? And whenever the BOE has to call the school, it's just think of like a storm looming over the school, and like we don't want that. And the principal had no idea, and because of that, he had to come down on the teacher that invited our teacher, and it just was like a domino effect to the point where we actually had to move the teacher to another school set. And so the other two schools, or three, I believe he was in, were very sad for him to go because he couldn't teach there anymore, and we had to replace him. But we didn't get rid of him. We just had to replace him into another school system. But needless to say, there was just this whole paperwork, just a barrage of paperwork that had to be filled out and apologize and everything, and us going to the BOE and apologizing. And this was like the tip of the iceberg, or this is not a so bad story. If there's a story where the teacher did something really bad, not only will he be removed from the school, but like all the teachers that are tied to him, i.e. our company, they would also have to move as well. And so we would actually, in fact, lose that district as one of our districts. So it's a very, very finicky situation when it comes to these awkward situations. So we immediately cleaned it up, fixed it, and tried to just move on with life. But yeah, it was quite a horror story. Okay, so yeah, next slide, please. Sorry. So underfunding and financial crisis. It's easier to see the bigger problem in Tokyo just because these districts are big and there's lots of industry. And for example, some areas will have a very, as I put it, a wonderfully bottomless budget where they can just have these nice engaging blackboards with touch sensitive panels and just everything, the whole shebang. And I even heard talks of some schools getting iPads for the upper grade levels. And the places that are focused with this kind of stuff would be Shinjuku and Shibuya. So remember at the beginning of the slideshow, I kind of showed you the map. Shinjuku is that area right next to mine. Yeah, well, they're the ones that are relishing in these beautiful extra materials for teaching. Whereas areas like mine sadly get zero presence of industries or business, which means we have a very meager budget to work with. We only get maybe one set, if that, of flashcards and books. And well, actually, the books themselves we get plenty of copies, but I'm talking like flashcards, which are really crucial. We get one set. So when a certain class is divided into two groups, like there's the group that gets English and there's a group that has a hard time, we separate them, and then it's easy for us to teach. We only have one set of flashcards, so we have to find other ways to get the actual words to the other class as well, or the other group, whether that be from using a computer or just making them flat out, or something. We have to be really creative. In my experience, even though it's not a good thing, I've always made it work out to the better. It just kind of makes you think more out of the box. makes me be more creative about certain things, and like, like, okay, well, if they can't do it like this, what can I do? And then, just kind of makes you think. So for me, it just made me a stronger teacher when it came to, I guess, guerrilla teaching, if you will. Like if there's guerrilla marketing, this is like guerrilla teaching. Um, yeah, next slide, please. So if you guys are ready to laugh, we are still using traditional blackboards in Nakano. The chalk, the whole nine. Like when you're erasing and you kind of lean back on the chalkboard, you get a big giant, stain of white on the back, and notice you just hear giggles from the students, and that causes about 5 minutes of wonderment of what's going on. Yeah, I love chalkboards too. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of them. But man, I would love a dry erase board. It's just, oh man, what I would do for a dry erase board. Also, air conditioners and heating systems were just recently installed in some of the schools, and before that, I can tell you right now, we had to gruel past some heavy summers. Like I'm talking, I'm wearing a polo, and we still have to look presentable with the kids. We can't just walk up in shorts. Um, but we had to wear pants and the whole gambit, just like every other teacher. And you can just see some of these teachers, these giant sweat stains. I feel so bad, like just like, man, like if they were in the States, this would be something that junior high students would easily pick on. And here they respect it because they're going through the same thing. We're all in the same boat. So, we just find ways to cope with it. The winters are pretty bad as well, but usually they have this dangerous gas-powered stove in the middle of the class, or actually in the front of the classroom. That contraption that I pointed out earlier in the slideshow was that gas stove. So it's gas-powered. So for like the first 10, 15 minutes of it being powered on, it's just like the whole room smells like you're in a car, like it's just gas. And I'm like, is this not dangerous? Like, does anybody not get it? Like, we're inhaling fumes, people. And so they're just like, oh, it's no big deal, but we'll open a window for you. I'm like, well, please, maybe for the kids too. I don't know, But yeah, so these stoves, and it's such a hazard. I mean, you're dealing with like 5, 6 year olds. Actually, no, I'm sorry, 7, 8 year olds. Running around the classroom with activities, and then this giant like stove, and they're so disciplined. It's amazing. Like all that's stopping them from like running into it is a little yellow piece of tape saying, "Don't cross this little border." And that's pretty much it. And they amazingly like just respect that little boundary. They don't go near it. They enjoy its warmth and comfort, but that's about it. And it's just so dangerous. Yeah, I know. But anyway, moving on. Next slide, please. So the increasing demands made upon teachers. This one, besides the fact that you wanted a heavy focus, I actually was really shocked with this one too. Actually, one of the teachers was stating that about 80% of the teachers' time during work hours is spent on tasks not relating to the actual planning of future lessons or student-focused work, which is really, really big. I mean, I know that in the States we do have a problem about that, but it's not nearly as bad as this from what it looks like. Like, I mean, in the sense, like when Stephanie said, "Man, I feel spoiled now." It's like, yeah, like on so many different levels you feel spoiled. Like, yeah, granted we have to deal with the parents, but like most of the time when you're lesson planning and stuff, I mean, I'm not a teacher in the States, so I wouldn't know, but I mean, just from watching these videos that we're watching them during school, that it looks like they really do have some time to kind of focus on really developing really good lesson plans. Sadly enough, it's for focusing on the tests that we have to do, but either way, it's still time, which is pretty amazing. And thank you. Yeah, the clip art was really cool. I just Googled, like, I have another student, one of us, said something about like Googling, and I'm a big Google fan as well. That's like my Bible for clip art. So yeah, most of the time is given to most of the time that I said that's actually devoted to non-stuff. Non-teaching stuff is like the principal or the vice principal will ask them to do reports on anything and everything about in and out of the classroom. It's really sad. Next slide, please. So she stated that in the whole year she's going to be roughly submitting about 500 reports. 500 reports. 500 reports. I have to say that twice because it's a shock to me. So because of the BOE, they focus on, so for time sometimes they focus on like the way it's being taught. They'll say, okay, well, perhaps this time instead of communication, let's do written. So let's change the whole structure of the class. So this will then filter down to the teacher. Well, she'll have to submit a report on this and kind of see how it's working in the classroom. I mean, this is time that she could be, using her lesson planning time to do other lessons or really cool ideas, but instead having to restructure her lessons just to tailor it to what the Ministry of Education ultimately wants. Yeah, the club activities the students enjoy after school require a teacher present as well for adult supervision. So this is mandatory for all teachers, which means you'll need to be present during the activities until the end. Depending on the school, most teachers don't even get a choice as to which club they can join. It's usually assigned to the teachers by the principal. So, for example, Miss Moria Arkino, she was assigned the badminton club. She has nothing. She has no knowledge of badminton. Like, she doesn't know, and she's required to be there. And actually, at the end of the day or at the end of the week, submit a report on the participation level and all that stuff as well. The teachers obviously tolerate this. Like, don't tolerate this, but it's part of the job. I mean, they know this going into the system. It's not something of a shock to them. They know that they're going to be doing this for the most part of teaching, but they still feel like they can do it. And you're right, it's a waste of time. It's not necessary. But the Japanese, and I don't mean to sound rude, but they love their paperwork. I mean, just with the horror story I told you before, there was so much paperwork that had to be submitted from our end as well, just to relay the information, and it's just a waste of time, you know. But yeah, it's the fact about it. Next slide, please. So at least once a week, and that's at least minimum. That's not to say that it happens more. Teachers are expected to go to the BOE and attend a mandatory workshop on teaching, or some kind of devoted workshop devoted to their subject of teaching. And of course, they'll need a report by the end of the week about this particular business trip, if you will. So according to Miss Matsuda, another teacher that I interviewed, the total time that's spent with the students in actually teaching is between 20 to 29 hours. Yeah, okay, so that's a good thing, I guess, that you guys are doing workshops as well. I mean, in a way, it's important. I agree. It's really, really interesting to always, you're always learning. It's an ongoing process. But to have to kind of submit some kind of report is just like, does that need to be done? Like, I don't know. That's kind of where it's the balance of time wasted. But yeah, that's definitely a good thing, is the going to these workshops. So next slide, please. So diminished respect for teachers. So my first impression when I came to Japan was absolutely surreal. The students are expected to maintain a level of respect towards the teacher that's just absolutely amazing. It's, to put it, I don't know how else to put it. The students will, when you first walk into the classroom, the bell rings, the students will stand up, and there's usually a teacher, or I'm sorry, one or two students that are elected to kind of like guide the class for the day. And so what they'll do is they'll announce their grade level, their name. I'm sorry, let me go back for a second. What they'll do is they'll say attention, and then they'll say the number of the period. Like, so for example, third period would be like, third period, English hour has begun, let's begin. And then they have like a very fancy way of saying please, and then they bow, as you can see in this picture. And then you bow, obviously, of course. If not, that's disrespectful. And then you just continue with the class. When you also, let's see, in the classroom, the students wait for the teacher to give the go-ahead. So in other words, they can't begin anything without you saying, okay, let's begin, which is kind of interesting. Let's see if I forgot anything else. Also, yeah, when they're entering the teacher's room that I had stated before, they're supposed to announce their grade level, their name, and the nature of the business as to why they're even going into the teacher's room. I would say, for example, me, I'm a third-year student or something. I would say, third grade, Alberto Flores, I'm coming for the media room keep, and then they'll say, please, and then they say, please, okay, you're welcome, here you are, here's the key, have a good day, and like, thank you very much, and then, excuse me in a very polite way. Um, so yeah, next slide. Now, with that being said, um, from the teacher's point of view, thank you. From the teacher's point of view, after speaking to Miss Sakai, which is the third teacher that I interviewed, she said that, I think that the respect for teachers has diminished increasingly. I remember when I was in junior high, we would only address our teachers with Keigo. Now, more and more students are talking to teachers as if they were old friends, and it's sort of sad. Let me go ahead and explain what Keigo means. Keigo is basically an ultra polite form of speaking to someone. It is often used when speaking to elders or people of higher company status. You can also witness this form of Japanese when you enter a store or a restaurant. It's they're all the staff are always trained on speaking this way. And I don't know if you've ever gone to your favorite Japanese restaurant in Orlando or in Florida or anywhere. Next time you walk in, just listen to what they're saying. They're more than likely going to say something like "irashaimase," which is kind of like a very polite way of saying thank you. And they'll usually yell it to the top of their lungs, like "irashaimase," which is kind of interesting. Here, we hear it all the time. Everywhere you go, you just hear it always, always. So it's kind of funny. So now you can identify it. Now you know a little Japanese. You're welcome. Okay, so next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, wait. Let's stay on this slide one more. Oh, sorry. If we can go back one more. Okay, so yeah, as to what Ms. Sakai said, I do agree. The majority of the students have this more relaxed demeanor when engaging a teacher. As a Westerner, I sometimes promote this because it gives me a chance to get to know a little bit more about the students, the character, and also how to focus my connection to that student. What I mean by what I mean by more relaxed is they'll kind of walk up to you and just say, "Hey, what's going on? Um, oh, what's up with your shirt today?" Just kind of like relaxed talking, which is for them is a little shocking because again, teachers are held to a high standard, and to have this kind of like address is just really rare. But it's just more and more I've noticed it. But I like that. It's for me, it gives me a chance to really get to know the way the student is, and just and how to deal with them if they decide to be funny or something. And actually, if we can go to the next slide, I'll give you an example. So one of my students in the first year, junior high, of course, and as you know, junior high, so most of you are probably like rolling your eyes like, oh yeah, junior high. They're very immature. They'd like to be very immature in this year. Actually, most of the years in junior high, they're kind of immature. But this person, Shida, Mr. Shida, and Kun is just like a polite way of saying a young boy, like Kun is like, Mr. Shida kind of a thing. And versus the robot student. I have a few of these students, like the robot student and Mr. Shida. So Shida's a person who's acting up always, likes to yell. Actually, surprisingly enough, he knows a lot of English, which is really weird. So he likes to be disruptive in class. Point out I guess, embarrassingly enough, I'm a kind of hairy guy, and obviously there's no way of escaping that in the classroom, and so he'll always have to point out that I'm hairy, and obviously becomes a problem in class. So my wife's over there on the couch, and she's listening, and she's laughing, yes. So I know him. Like now I know how to deal with him. It's like his outbursts, his way of dealing with me in the class, like I can then say, okay, this is his type of character. This is what he would be attuned to. So let me throw it back his way, this way. And I know how to deal with him. If he's not understanding something, I'll use a little bit of humor and maybe some wit to get it back on his court. So he'll say, oh, okay, I get it. And then he doesn't have that "I'm so lost right now" face, And that's good. Like, it's easy for me to gauge where he's coming from. He's participating, whether it's positive or negative. He's still participating, and to me, that's really important, especially in a second language class. Now, the robot student is what we were talking about earlier about Keigo. I have a few of these students where I've had to do like an oral exam, And of course, I'll have them sit in front of me. Usually it's on a one-to-one basis, and the student will bow and sit down and say, thank you very much for having me. And I'm like, okay, you're very welcome. Let's begin. And we'll start saying the English exam, and it's just constantly very robotic, no facial expression, nothing, and it's really hard to gauge what the student is like. There's no feeling behind this. It's very emotionless. And as soon as the bell rings, like as soon as they're out, the kid will be funny and goofy or talking to his friends, whatever it is. But I don't get to see that because I'm on my way to the next class. So it's really tough to reach out to these students that are in her eyes like good and being polite, because I don't know how to align with them. I guess that's the key word, is aligning to them. So it's a tough balance. I prefer the Mr. Sheetas as opposed to the robots for that reason. Also, another form of diminished respect is the parents themselves are starting to lose respect for the teachers. For example, one of the teachers that I interviewed, she's fairly young, and the kids love her because of that, her youthfulness, and she's able to get her points across and stuff for that reason. But for some reason, the parents, if there's an issue with a student, they don't really put enough, how do you say, they don't hold her to a higher degree. Like they, for whatever reason, they kind of disrespect her for her age. Like they don't really listen to what she has to say. Actually, sometimes, sadly enough, some of these parents are actually have a higher education, maybe a master's or a PhD. So their attitude is more like, why do I need to listen to you? Like, why are you going to lecture me on my child when you yourself only have this teaching license? Like, I raised my child, blah 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 blah, and they have an attitude, and this is kind of what she was telling me, and it's sad, and there's really nothing you can do about it. Like you're in a private school setting, so you're working for the government, and you're really limited on what kind of resources you can actually reach out to when you're talking to the parents. Easily with a private school, you can just say, well, if he doesn't shape up, he can ship out, which is I was not such a good student in my first years of elementary school, and I heard that phrase quite often. So yeah, so shape up or ship out. So it's one of those things you can't really say to a parent in a public school setting. So yeah, next slide please. So here we go. Impoverished neighborhoods. Um, I guess in the traditional sense that I was thinking, where I'm thinking like very slummy areas full of drugs and crime and project housing and graffiti everywhere, and like the barrel of barrel with fire coming out of it. Like that's I don't know why, this is like the most stereotype in my mind when I think of an impoverished neighborhood, which I know is completely inappropriate. But oddly enough, there's really no such neighborhoods here in Japan, and actually in Florida, I don't think so either with the trash can. But either way, like the you don't really notice the lower income housing here as much. It blends really well with the rest of the city. So I mean, somebody literally has to point it out to you, which in fact they did. There's actually project housing, or I guess like subsidized government housing. It's really close to one of our schools that I teach. It's actually the biggest school that I teach at, and now it's kind of making sense as to why it's so big. The buildings themselves are right off of um, the train line, so they're really close to the train, so it allows them to quickly get onto the train. These families are low income; they don't really have too much too much to offer, so they're forced to kind of depend on the government for subsidies. And so for that reason, as you can see from one of our previous um, assignments, we had to kind of talk about this. The parents have very little involvement in the students' academic development for this reason, because they're either A, coming from a troubled home, or B, they're working at all hours of the day, so they don't really have a chance to kind of connect with the student, or their child, to see what's going on, what they're learning, or C, they're just coming from a divorced family home, and they're divorced, and they're just really not taking well to this, which is quite normal. It's just normal for a student, a child to kind of go through this. or it's very difficult for them to handle. So they act out in school. For example, Mr. Shida, uh, who's very he loves to act out. Like I'm sure he would fall into one of these categories for that specific reason. You know, just because something at home is not clicking, he's not getting the attention he needs, or he's going through some difficult times, and so he acts out by picking on teachers and students and just being loud all in general. It's exactly true. It's a cry for help, and that's kind of what I wrote down there. It's sad the divorce rate is starting to increase more and more each year. When I was living in Mexico a few years back, the same thing happened as well. Like the divorce rate was starting to catch on. It was before then it was considered very taboo to be divorced in Mexico because we're a very religious country, and we hold our marriage vows to a very high standard. And all of a sudden, you just started seeing little by little these divorce rates and towards this very trendy thing. Um, and so now it's starting to be the same thing here. A lot of these kids are coming out of college and they're just kind of getting married, having kids, and now they're just realizing maybe it wasn't the right move, it wasn't the right decision, and boom, divorce. And then boom, these kids are now going through this as well. So yeah, I mean, as far as impoverished neighborhoods, I think that's kind of where I would align the topic to is these kind of conditions at home. So home conditions. Next slide, please. Yeah, discrimination. So there are a few non-Japanese students in the school system. For the most part, they're taken pretty well, and sometimes they're included as part of the team. You know, they're very curious to know what it's like to be from Cameroon. You know, we have some guys from Africa. We have one from New Zealand. There's one from Canada. A few from China. And actually, China outside of the school walls, not talking about students, just older people in general, really look down on the Chinese. I myself am Mexican, and being in the States, it's kind of the same feeling. You know, lots of people look down on the Mexicans. They associate us with like dishwashing stuff and the cleaners and the grass cutters and all that stuff. And sadly, that's kind of the way some people look at it. But and that's just kind of how it is, and it's the discrimination factor is what I mean to say. And it's looked at the same way here. Most restaurants that have like the dishwashers are usually Chinese. So the low level jobs you see mostly Chinese people. I thank God that my wife, she's Chinese, but she has a very amazing position as a concierge for a beautiful hotel here in Shinjuku actually. So I'm very blessed to have her with an awesome job. But anyway, nonetheless, the discrimination is in the school setting is pretty minute when it comes to foreigners. Um, the first thing that comes to my mind is bullying, and the reported bullying is, as I stated before, is rather low in public schools. Thank God, and really, there's no such thing as a gang. Um, some of the students will openly admit, and just because they love the bravado of it, and it's true. When I was more in a different state here in Japan, Ibaraki, which is north of Tokyo, northeast. Some of the students would always tell me that their dad's part of the Yakuza mafia, and they openly love to show this off. And it's never yeah, you're right. It's really crass, to be honest, but it's never like in a sign of like don't mess with me or you'll get the horns kind of thing. It's just more like my dad owns a Porsche. Like, oh yeah, well, I'm the member of the blah 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 club. Like, oh yeah, my dad's the Yakuza. It's kind of one of those things that's just very showy offy. But but yeah, it's never been a factor. And most of the teachers are kind of keen to the students that are part of those families, and they, for the most part, they're a little more scared than I am. I really don't care. I mean, whatever gang or whatever mafia you're in, congratulations to you. But you're in my classroom, and if you're in my classroom, you're here to learn. You're not here to show off. And if you wanna threaten me, that's your thing. But at least listen to me and listen to what I have to do in my class. I really take it seriously. Um, so anyway, so the bullying that's been reported is usually just interestingly enough, Ms. Sakai was mentioning that most of these students actually bully their own race, like Japanese to Japanese, and it's really interesting. Like the Japanese that doesn't fit the archetype of a typical Japanese person, there are usually targets for this. Maybe a student who, I think I put some examples here. Let's see here. Students that are unhygienic. I mean, unfortunately, there's some students that just only take a shower 2 or 3 times a week. So and it's really interesting. I don't know why they would do that, but they smell really bad. And of course, obviously, they're just opening themselves up to being picked on. And to be honest, I don't know why. And the teachers will talk to them, but they just choose not to take showers. And I mean, I remember when I was like 5 or 6 or something like that, I hated taking showers. So I can align with that. But I mean, when you're in junior high, that shouldn't be an option. I don't know. Other children will have like a small lisp, so when they're speaking in Japanese, the vowel consonants really need to be enunciated, and if there's a small little, lisp or something, then the kids are always easy, or will always be clued in to kind of pick on you for that, and or just plainly doesn't look like they belong, another reason. It's another target. So like super shy students are super shy because of this, because they know they have some kind of imperfection that the other students will kind of target them. So they kind of keep to themselves. So it's more of a mental bullying than more than anything. And the other reason, another thing that's actually kind of going on here is cyberbullying through the online. I was about to say internets, but yeah, most of these kids will have cell phones, and there's this big app called Line app, and it's pretty popular here. It's kind of like, I guess, Skype over there. It has like text abilities, and you can also call through the application as well, and do like group chats. And so they'll basically like say bad words through these chat message boards or whatever. And when they get to school, they'll say, well, hey, why'd you call me a MF? And I don't understand. And then you get like the tail end of the argument, because you obviously weren't included as a teacher. You weren't included in the conversation, so you have to kind of see what's going on. And it's just like playing CSI or Law and Order, when they get back into the classroom, and you have to try to quell it somehow, So that's kind of like the discrimination that I was noticing mostly. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, I think that's pretty much it. That wraps up the presentation. If you guys have any